Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about really looking at what most of the science at this point is saying on obesity and fat gain and everything else. And obviously it is an energy balance equation. It is a calories in, calories out. Anyone who's telling you that that isn't ultimately what's going on is being deceptive. But the issue is, how are we getting to that biologically? And again, I've discussed in the past a little bit, and probably we should discuss a little bit more the social and socioeconomic factors that are involved, because those are enormous factors in our obesity epidemic, and we need to be clear, those are big factors, okay? And you can't remove those. But let's come over and talk about what's happening with the biology. And the problem is, you get all these people with different fat diets who maybe they get one little piece of the puzzle right, and then they think, oh, they've got it all, but they're really not seeing the larger picture. And now what we're seeing with the emerging research is showing that fructose does seem to be an enormous, if not the largest factor. But you also have to couple that in with the overall diet. In other words, excessive fructose intake, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean from fruit in humans. We're talking when fruit, and I've done whole videos on fructose metabolism of how the body handles most of the fructose in fruit up to a certain extent, much better than it does from refined sources because of where they're absorbed in the upper intestine versus lower intestine. That's kind of a big deal. That is enormous as far as the differences go. But what we're dealing with here is, this is what creates the insulin sensitivity problem, right? This is what starts creating insulin resistance. Okay, that is the excessive amount of refined fructose intake, or fructose that is reaching the liver. Now, that is not necessarily where we're gaining the fat, but this is what creates the cascade of effects downstream. Okay, does that make sense? When you're looking at the bigger picture, it is really the fat calories that we are storing, but then we come over to the point of, how are we getting these excess fat calories? It's not because we ate a steak or a couple eggs. Okay, that's not what's causing it. Because those things in moderation aren't really linked to obesity. They're not in moderate amounts. They're not even linked to real disease in moderation. In excess they are. But again, let's come over, how do we get to that excess? All right, when we start getting insulin resistance as a result of the excessive fructose intake, what happens with that, it starts to accumulate fat deposits in the liver. So we get non-alcoholic fatty liver. It is obviously heavily linked with large amounts of refined fructose intake, the same way that alcohol does it. It actually causes it through the exact same metabolic pathway, right? The biochemistry is pretty much the same as far as the fructose the liver is handling versus it handling alcohol. Very much the same effect on the liver, okay? If the liver has to deal with it and the rest of the body hasn't turned the fructose into glucose already. So we start getting that. Well, both of those things contribute to gaining organ fat. They contribute to insulin resistance. Well, why is that a problem? No, it's not because insulin itself causes body fat. It doesn't seem to. It's that the insulin resistance is then linked to higher appetite and lethargy. Okay, in other words, once a person has started to develop any significant degree of insulin resistance, what happens? They get hungry easier. Their appetite becomes really problematic, particularly with the spikes in blood sugar. Okay, do you see where we're going here? Hopefully people are getting the picture. So if they're having all these various spikes in blood sugars, they're not able to manage these things, their appetite is higher. Well, when we're hungry, we don't crave sugar. We don't crave a bowl of rice. You say, well, I crave bread. No, you crave bread with some butter on it. You crave pizza. You crave a hamburger. Okay, what happens? What happens here? Well, then you're eating these combinations of food. You're overeating excessive calories because you're hungry and your energy is down. At that point, the person then is struggling to use the carbohydrates for fuel because of the insulin resistance, and that's what it needs to use and wants to use. And then we just store the fat. We store the fat from those meals. All right. Well, this is quite a cascade effect happening. All right, so then this is what's happening on the energy inside. What happens on the energy outside? You're more tired, you're more lethargic, you move less. So people who have been developed through this, they're starting to become insulin resistant, they're tired. They don't want to exercise, they don't want to move as much. So they're burning less. They're burning less, and then they're eating more, and they're eating more fat calories that they will then store through the excess. Okay? So ultimately, the fat gain itself is largely coming from the excess dietary fat that they're eating, but the appetite that's creating it is largely due to the insulin resistance, which, again, the largest factor at the moment. And again, it's not saying excessive saturated fat can't contribute to this, it can. But at this juncture, it looks like fructose is a larger overall contributor socially for us. Okay, so again, we have the case where the excessive fructose, and that's not coming from eating a bit of watermelon or some cantaloupe, guys. It's coming from all the table sugar, the high fructose corn syrup, these things. Again, we're getting in a situation to where that's accumulating, starting to create fatty liver, visceral fat storage right around your organs, which then contributes to insulin resistance. The insulin resistance then makes you hungry. It makes you tired. It makes you lethargic. So then you eat a lot more and you move less. Then people start eating all the extra fatty foods. Now, if they only had access at that point to, chicken and white rice with almost no fat, they really wouldn't be having these problems. They would still have the insulin resistance, though. So that's not a solution, because they would gain dramatically less weight, of course, but they're still going to be tired. And then the fructose is going to make them struggle with the glucose metabolism a little bit because of the insulin resistance. They're not going to be as efficient with this stuff. Again, they're going to be tired. They're going to be hungry. So even then, once the insulin resistance is there, this isn't going to be a foolproof solution either. But, you couple this with the fact that we live in a society where we have access to just unlimited amounts of highly refined fat calories on top of it. And then what is all the food laden with that? Usually more sugar, right? More specifically, more refined fructose, again in the form of table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, then combined with all these fatty foods, we just have a vicious cycle that accumulates. So the solutions, again, are that we've got to cut a lot of this stuff out, right? And I'm not telling people to go keto, because that's not necessary. I'm telling them to cut the refined fructose out. And then probably, unless they need it for the calories, you got to limit fat intake. Now, if you have someone who's burning through that much fat calories, who's athletic or high energy turnover, they'll still be fine. So again, it's all about what's happening with the individual at that point. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.